What's up, Zach here, and today I've got the all-new Nike G.T Cut 3, and it's not really news that I wasn't really stoked on the G.T Cut 2. Thought there was just way too much going on there for a drop-in midsole shoe. I kind of thought it was trying to occupy two different, styles of shoe. A lot of people told me I was wrong. They loved them. A lot of people agreed. Whatever you thought of the G.T Cut 2, the G.T Cut 3 is a lot different. They've traded all the bells and whistles for simplicity, basically in the form of ZoomX foam. But let's see if it is any good. Let's get into it. The uppers of the GT Cut 3 they're unique for sure. If you look at the tongue and how the tongue interacts with the forefoot of the shoe, you notice all these holes in there. There's a ton of pores there, right? It looks like it's super porous. It also looks like it is super padded. In the ankle collar portion of the tongue, there is just a ton of really light, fluffy padding in there. And where that ankle collar meets the midfoot of the shoe, there is a hard crease in there. So the tongue does bend with the ankle, which does increase the comfort of these shoes exponentially. As you move through the tongue, there is still a lot of padding underneath of it. It's definitely not as padded as the ankle collar portion, but the one thing is these pores really don't go anywhere. The pores on the outside of the shoe don't connect to the inside of that top surface, and then the pores in the padding don't really connect to the outside pores, right? So if you look at the breathability test on these things, they did only heat up 112.2 degrees, which I think is pretty decent for, how padded and plush the tongue is. It's just minutes later when I put the thermometer on the tongue portion of the shoe, it was still registering in the low 100-degree Fahrenheit range. And that was like I said, a few minutes later. The rest of the shoe is okay, but that tongue is holding on to a ton of heat and moisture. I noticed when I was playing in these, even in a pretty climate-controlled environment, and not for all that long, about an hour and a half, I was getting a lot of moisture buildup in the ankle collar of the shoe as well as in the tongue. So, if you look at the breathability mapping of this thing too, really tells the same story. There was no fog getting through that tongue whatsoever. The only place it was getting out was on the sides, where, there is actually some nice channeling here on the sides, which we'll see on the lace line, but not a lot of egress there. So it's a light enough shoe, so it's not gonna hold on to a ton of heat because it's so light, the materials are so light, but portions of this shoe are gonna hold on to moisture and heat a little bit more than you think. The one thing we got to talk about is the containment in the lace line. Now, you saw what the breathability test did with all that padding in there, right? However, the lace line, it looks pretty reinforced. Every lace eyelet is reinforced. The front of the shoe has a little bit more netting and stitching, and then some TPU up here, like right in the lateral forefoot. But the rest of the shoe is pretty light, which means the containment in these, which we'll see with the ZoomX and the midsole, just might be a mismatch for some players. So we'll talk more about the containment as the video goes on, but I did want to give an explanation as to why the containment score is so low. When you have a midsole this light, you got to make up for it somewhere, and usually if you're trying to make up for containment all the way in the uppers, you're gonna start to have some problems for people that aren't stable already. But what was a really pleasant surprise on the Cut 3s was its upper durability. On the upper durability test, 10-second tie grit sandpaper, the burr barely makes it through that red kind of outer lattice of stitching. This paneling material is tougher than you think it is, at least to abrasion. So whereas, the containment of these, even though, it does have what feels like to be a pretty, stiff external heel counter, just still isn't, like I said, it isn't elite. The abrasion durability and the abrasion resistance of these things is really outsized for what the shoe looks like. The midsole of the threes is really where people are gonna opt in or out. We talked about this with the containment in the uppers. It is just an entire bed of ZoomX foam. Yes, there is, I guess, a shank, this plastic piece on the bottom that you can actually see going through the forefoot. It is just really flexible plastic though. You can see it just bends all over the place. There is nothing in this shoe that is a rigid container, right? There's no carbon fiber plate. There's nothing like in the ZoomX line of running shoes. This isn't the Alpha Fly or the Vaporfly. This thing is meant to be a little bit more buttery, and because of that, yes, it's incredibly flexible and incredibly forgiving, but there also isn't any rigidity. If you look at the bounce height test on these things, got 41.5 centimeters in the heel and then 47 in the forefoot. So there is no lack of bounce in these things. I mean, they've got an incredible amount of ups to them, and they are super forgiving going front to back. It's just that ZoomX is pretty squishy, and in terms of side-to-side stability of that, there just isn't much there, especially in the rear foot, where the rear foot is actually pretty narrow. And in a ZoomX shoe, especially for a basketball shoe, you do need a little bit more of a stable base in the back. So I think that's where some people are gonna opt in or out. When we talk about the playability, you know, we'll kind of get into what kind of players are really gonna benefit from this and which aren't. But this is definitely, I think, the dividing line in the midsole. And you can see where I was talking about in the uppers, where there's nothing to keep this midsole really stable. So the uppers kind of have to make up for it. And anytime you're trying to make up for stability in the uppers, like I said, that can be a pretty precarious spot to get in. However, I may have an idea about how to fix it. This here is lead tape for a tennis racket to weigh the hoop down or to customize the swing weight of a tennis racket. However, if you take a 12 centimeter strip of it, put it in the middle of a shoe, or put 2 of them, there are 3 grams per each one of these strips. And so, you know, what it'll do is it'll at least make the shoe a little bit more bottom heavy and maybe a little bit more bottom stable. Now, lead tape is incredibly flexible, right? So it's not gonna add any rigidity. It's basically just weight for the bottom of the shoe. You know, an orthotic is gonna obviously give a much better side-to-side containment, at least a high-walled orthotic will, right, with a deeper heel cup, but a much more low-profile solution is lead tape. Is it a surefire answer? Absolutely not. Am I advocating for this, or is this advice in any way? Absolutely not. It was just the first thing I thought of when I played in them. I noticed maybe a little bit of difference putting it in the shoe. Maybe that was just more placebo effect, but don't go telling people that I'm advocating for lead tape in shoes. This is purely experimental, but I don't know. I'm gonna keep messing with this a little bit in the future. Now, the outsole tread of these things is pretty interesting. It is this mountain peak pattern going all the way through the shoe. It is 2 tread pods. Now, if you look at this on the grip test ramp, it doesn't slip till 42 degrees, and the initial grip on these things is pretty darn good. It's that they just pick up dust like crazy. Now, because the tread is so wide set apart, it doesn't matter as much because you're still going to get some traction actually, because there just is such a big chasm between the actual treads. But you are going to want to be wiping these down every so often if you're playing on anything other than a perfectly maintained court. All right, so when talking about the speed capabilities of the GT Cut 3, you also kind of have to look at what this thing is like pre-dust and post-dust. All right, let's see how this goes after some dust. 31. Oh. Yeah. Now, honestly, I thought post getting a little bit dusty, these shoes became a little bit more forgiving, and I didn't want to pop out the sides of them a little bit more, so I almost had maybe a little more confidence once these things were just a little bit more forgiving. I mean, the beauty is going to be in the eye of the beholder there. Some people are going to want that rigid cutting power to these. Other people are going to want to feel like they're not going to roll over the shoe. I mean, if you look at the speed ratio of them, they come in at 3.52. That's a 3.42 plus 0.1 for the presence of a shank on the shank score. I wasn't going to give it a 0.1, but I mean, there clearly is something there. I mean, it does go into the forefoot, even though it is really flexible. I'll give them the 0.1. The shoe is definitely speedy enough to deserve a 3.52. These things are just incredibly forgiving going front to back. I mean, if you're on a fast break, this is the shoe you want on, right? I mean, this thing just covers court so quick. And, you know, if you're a high school or college player, or if you're playing organized ball and you've got a coach like Coach Carter and just wants you to run, this is the shoe I would want on me just because it is so forgiving and it just gives such a kickback while it is new, or if you're a lighter player, you'll get more longevity out of that. It's just that, you know, what happens once you've reached that speed and you're trying to stop on a dime? Do you trust yourself with the containment aspects of the shoe, or do you want a little bit more of that forgiveness from this shoe getting a little bit dusty, right? So kind of choose your own adventure with the speed and with the profile of this outsole tread. Once again though, the durability of the GT Cut 3 really coming to save the day on the outsole durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. Not even a millimeter of damage on the red rubber or the ice rubber. Now, these tread lines are incredibly narrow and they are really spaced far apart. So there is nothing that is going to be protecting each one of these tread lines. So they're still going to wear down a little bit faster on an outdoor court versus something with chunkier, you know, a little bit more flat topped tread. So just watch out for that. However, on an indoor court, carpet, rubberized court, these are going to last in the uppers as well as in the outsole longer than you think they're going to. And I think that those chasms of rubber there are really what is going to kind of save the shoe. Like I said, once it gets dusty, it's still getting grip, right? It's getting grip from you putting it down on different angles, right? And getting those gaps of tread to kind of squeegee into the court. So all in all, this durability profile for how light the shoe is in the uppers as well as in the outsole is really darn good. The fit of the GT Cut 3, once again, is another walking contradiction. These are pretty standard in length and just pretty standard in width. Now, the one thing I noticed in them is though, they fit in the forefoot a little bit more forgiving than what their measurements show, right? And that's because the uppers are much more forgiving, right? And there's a lot of padding in them. So there's just a lot of room for expansion. The midfoot in them is decently narrow. You can kind of see the stock insole rides up on the medial side of the shoe, right? And that's just because the shoe is meant to kind of use the uppers for a little bit more width there in the midfoot of the shoe. I'd say a narrow and medium foot go true to size. A narrow foot even, if you want to go down a half size and you don't have long feet, you will get more containment because you're 1-to-1. A 2E, I really think you have to go 1-to-1 on these to get the containment, to get a little bit more contact with the shoe. A 4E, because of the situation there, I think if you want to go up 1/2 size, I think that's about as far as I would go. You start going up more sizes, you're going to start to introduce heel slipping. You're also going to start to introduce more side-to-side slipping in these shoes. You want these to be hugging you as much as possible. That's the only way you're going to get really any feelings of containment or really any proprioception, right? That's really the only way you're going to be able to tell where your body is in space in these shoes, because like I said, the stack in the forefoot is a little bit higher, right? So the ground contact through the ZoomX, it's not like it would be in a Phylon or a Cushlon, right? Now for the snake bitten foot, yeah, plantar heel pain, plantar fasciitis, bursitis, ball of foot pain, right? Metatarsalgia, anything like that. They are fantastic. If you've got Achilles tendonitis, arch strain, arch pain, peroneal tendonitis, posterior tibial tendonitis, that's where you might start to get some issues because that ZoomX is so squishy, right? And it is so forgiving, there's no container. So the shoe will start to rock a little bit, right? And you'll start to rock intrinsically in the shoe. So you've got to have a rigid orthotic that has an extrinsic post in these. That means a flattened spot in the heel so the orthotic doesn't tilt. In these, I would want something a little bit more rigid underfoot and just something that, like I said, will not rock back and forth. It's going to have to be a little bit more low profile because you could introduce some slipping if it isn't. Those will help, and those will also help with the lateral containment if the heel cup is deep enough. But I would say for somebody with tendonitis, those sorts of torsional issues, without an orthotic, definitely a no-go. With an orthotic, it's kind of going to be choose your own adventure. The performance capabilities of the GT Cut 3, you probably already know what I'm going to say. You really have to have the right skill set to use these shoes. If you are someone that really prides themselves on fast breaks, if you're more of a hustle player trying to get the ball down the other end of the court after a steal, something like that, yeah, these are fantastic if you got to cover a lot of ground really fast. And if you're somebody that is very light of foot, or if you're someone that's more of a flat-footed player, right, or a little bit more duck-footed, that you're not going to mind the lateral containment on these because an orthotic for that's going to fix that versus someone who maybe isn't the most stable out there. I just noticed that I really was bulging through these. Now, I don't have pro skills by any stretch of the imagination, but I also think there's a lot more people out there like me than there are someone who's playing on the Dallas Mavericks, right, or the Phoenix Suns. So I would say if you've got your footwork locked in, or you're somebody that, like I said, is more of a straight up and down player, right, these are gonna be awesome. I mean, for a Euro step, I mean, you're basically, it's like you're walking on the moon with these things. So that's the kind of thing, right? Like, as long as you're not cutting really hard side to side, they provide a ton of lift and just a lot of easy springiness off the ground. If you're someone that's trying to dunk in a lighter weight shoe with a rigid orthotic, of course, and if you're a lighter player, these are phenomenal. After a while, they're gonna start, you know, creasing, and that midsole is gonna start to wane on you. So I would say if you're a lighter weight player, going north to south a lot, these are gonna be absolutely fantastic. I would also say the shorter of a player you are, the better in these, because the taller of a player you are and the longer footed you are, the more lever arm you're gonna be putting on these things and the more you're gonna be creasing this shoe. So that's also kind of just a little thing to watch out for with the playability. Like I said, they're gonna fit some people just phenomenally, others are gonna wanna send them back right away. So yeah, I would say I do like these more than the GT Cut 2 because they're a little bit more straightforward, right? They're also kind of a walking contradiction too, right? And a lot of the things are good and bad for their durability versus their weight and their profile. So I think a lot of people are gonna like them, a lot of people aren't, but I'd love to know which one of those people you are in the comments down below. And if you wanna see the other sibling to the Nike GT Cut 3, the Nike GT Hustle 2 go onto the knife, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.